Help I can get.
Hello, friends. Welcome to our weekly Data Talk, a show where we talk with data science leaders from around the world. Super excited today to chat with Felipe Flores. He's the founder and host of Data Futurology. Right now, you should go subscribe to his podcast. We're going to be talking about that today. He's also the general manager and data science head over at Liberty Financial. Felipe, welcome to the show.
Mike, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to speaking with you, so it's a real pleasure.
Awesome. So before we get started, can you share a little bit about your journey in data science?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess like a lot of senior people in data science today, I didn't think that I was gonna end up in data science. And I remember when I was at college or at university, I enjoyed the data science subjects or the data subjects at the time. And I started freelancing and doing work for small businesses on the side where I would build them their database, build them some reports, help them optimize their sales, things like that. And this is while still at college. But when I had to pick a major within the degree, I actually didn't pick data as a specialization. I picked hardware design out of all things. And then when I was about to finish my studies, I did a thesis which was around detecting the tiredness of truck drivers in the mines, and that
Oh,
was
wow.
yeah, and that was done by EEG. So essentially, brainwave activity is what
Oh,
we were
wow.
measuring. And another guy, an electrical engineer, he built the sensors and then gave me the signals, and I digitized them. And then I had to go from brainwave activity to a number from 1 to 5, where 4 was when people went from 3 to 4, it meant that they were too tired to drive. And in trying to figure that out, the only way to do it was through machine learning, which was pre-archaic at the time. This is almost 20 years back. And I remember diving into the topic and then having to write, I think, about 5 or 6,000 lines of code
Wow.
to create the smallest neural network that you can imagine. That now is like puny. But back then, it was thousands of lines of code. It had only one hidden layer, and it got the job done. And then I was hooked.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So it's interesting. So you're in college. You love working with data. You're consulting. You're helping companies analyze their data. Um, and then you ended up choosing a major in college that was more around hardware design. So tell me about that, because that's a
Who
really
does that?
interesting. I think that's a really interesting choice because you're still doing data on the side anyway. So you're like, well, I'm doing data anyway, so maybe I'll just explore this other topic.
Well, I wish it was that well thought out. It was. I remember speaking to my friends and sort of people that were a few years ahead that I looked up to, and I was gauging, asking them for their opinion and advice, and at the time, so this is almost 20 years ago now. At the time, what I kept hearing was, "Oh, data, that's gonna die. That's not gonna be around." So I still did. I still did a few data courses and statistics, and obviously the machine learning side. But my major was on hardware design, and that to me shows that I was not reading the data at the time. I wasn't saying, "Look, my income at the moment comes from data." If I had the choice to study something, why not make it that? Yeah, it was such a silly mistake. But once I did that research project, that thesis, then from then on, everything's been working on data, studying data, and loving it ever since. And from then on, I did about 7 years consulting in large and small businesses. So I worked at IBM. I worked at small specialized analytics firms for those of 7 years, and then I decided to try it on my own. I started a consulting and software business with an old colleague of mine. And at the beginning, we didn't know what we were doing. We thought we could come up with a better product, with a better idea, and that
Excellent.
what we
Yeah.
thought was excellent. But
Yeah. Yeah.
this was before the lean startup revolution, and we did exactly the opposite of what the lean startup says. And we almost went bankrupt like 4 times. And we scraped through, pulled through, started to get some customers. And then 5 years in, we were a company of 50 people.
Wow.
So we had 24 analytics consultants, so the data miners, data scientists, and we had 24 software engineers that were building our product, which then we licensed to large companies, and then we ended up offering it as a SaaS product as well. And that was obviously like really hard yards, getting the business up and running, but really good experience. And after that, I sold my part after the 5 years. I went and worked, and the multi-year challenge in my mind when I went to start my business was I was doing consulting before through other companies, and then I thought, I'd like to see if I can do this for myself. If I can make it work, it's going to be tough, but I want to give it a go. So I jumped in, and that was 5 years. And what I felt when I was consulting is that to large companies, you're always trying to sell them your idea. You're always trying to get them to accept what you think would solve their problem. And sometimes they would ask you to do what they thought was the best thing. And there was always sort of like that tension that you were seeing with a little bit of maybe distrust in the sense that people would always think that you're trying to sell them something. So my next sort of multi-year challenge, I thought, let's go into a large company and see if I can create change from within. And I went into one of the large banks in Australia. I started the data science department in one of the main divisions, which was in the B2B side. And all the customers were companies with $400 million revenue upwards.
Wow.
So the publicly listed companies, government organizations, top end of town, multinationals. I was the first guy in there, and at the beginning, the division didn't want to hear or know anything about data science. And slowly, we worked out a strategy, started working directly with customers, and then built a 50-person team, 50 data scientists, and bringing in tens of millions of dollars for the bank every year. We built a really good culture. And what I ended up doing there is building a consulting company within a bank.
Oh.
That was like,
you did it
I
again.
fell into
you
it.
did it again.
I did it again. Yeah, I just went back to my roots. Yeah, and what we were using was the data assets that the bank had. So we would take, for example, credit card information, the transactions that people do in the credit cards, that we would analyze it, and then we would go talk to McDonald's about why they're losing on breakfast, for example, or where they should open their next shop. Because we could see as a bank, we could see everything that's happening in the industry, how far people travel for their meals in this case, or for their clothes, for their food, for anything. So we would analyze the data from the retail division, from the individuals, and we would offer that analysis to large companies. At the beginning, we would do that so they would buy financial products with our bank, financial products that were very profitable for us. And so we offered that as a freebie. And then we created this freemium model where we had a static report that was customized to the business. That was the freebie version, the free part of the model. And then we built a web app that had more detailed information, more up to date, that they could log in, and we would charge them for that. And then we built a set of APIs that they could call directly, and we would bill them monthly. We built the 3 products, built the team, got some good revenue for the bank. And then this is all the way up to last year. Then I got married at start of last year, and my wife and I had this dream to go on a long honeymoon, which was going to be 6 months or 12 months. We said we don't know how long we want to make it. And it meant that we both had to leave our jobs, which we almost didn't do, but ended up pulling the trigger. We did, and really enjoyed it. So at the time, that's when... looking back at the sort of the 15 years before that, my wife was an avid traveler, and she had spent about 2.5 years in total traveling. So she would do like 3 months at a time or 6 months at a time, but in total she had done like 2.5 years. While my longest break in the last 15 years had been like 2 weeks. So like a huge discrepancy. She knew exactly what she was in for. I was like pretty nervous that I was gonna get bored. She realized that, and she's like, "Oh, like we're gonna have a little stuff to do." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I kind of feel like I need a project." And then she said, "She's like, well, you like listening to podcasts so much. Why don't you start one? And then you can speak to interesting people wherever we go on the trip."
Yeah, yeah.
So I started doing that in Australia, interviewed about 12 people before we left, and then started interviewing um, data science leaders as we traveled. So in Japan, in Spain, in Germany, in UK, France, Switzerland, and that was sort of the most of last year. And then by the time I got back to Australia, I had a few thousand listeners, and then the first week that I go back, I actually didn't publish an episode, and I started getting messages from people saying, "Are you dead? What's happened? Have you disappeared?" And so then I was like, okay, well, I'll keep going, and it's something that I've really enjoyed. So it's been a year now with the podcast, and then once I go back, I go back to work, and now I'm in a sort of mid-sized financial services company that does loans and insurance. It's a group of companies, and it has a few, about 5 fintechs in the group, and then a few companies that are about 20, 25 years old. The interesting thing is that all the systems here are built in-house. So when you log onto the databases, you literally have 23 years worth of history with all the applications, whether they were accepted or rejected, and it's amazing training data. And the reason why I ended up coming to a company like this was after I left the large bank. While I was traveling, I was thinking, I went into that bank to see my multi-year challenge was, can I create change in a large organization? And I said, I built a team of 50, and we built all these, we brought in all this revenue. I was like, I felt like that was a tick,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, totally.
But then I was thinking about the people that work in that division, which is 5,000 people in the division. The company is about 50,000, but in that division, 5,000 people. And I thought, well, if you look at the working day of those 5,000 people, before data science and after data science, their day looks exactly the same. And that's because all the work, or the overwhelming majority of the work that my team did, was focused on the customer. So we were building insights, doing really interesting analysis, really interesting predictions for the customer. So we were giving them value, so then they would buy their financial products with us. But in terms of data science in the organization, we maybe did a dozen projects over 4 years, so not that much. And that sort of hit me when I was traveling last year, and I was like, oh well, okay, that I should sort of pull on this thread to see what I would like to do next. And my current multi-year challenge is to see if I can create a step change in an organization through the use of machine learning. So essentially putting machine learning behind every business process, behind every nook and cranny, every little bit that we can find in the organization, and see how quickly and how steep we can create that step change by injecting this technology and these approaches into an organization. And I thought, well, for me, where I am in my career, and I thought for me to have the responsibility, the remit, and to be able to drive this change at a pace that I would be happy with, I thought it would have to be a mid-sized company that was in an industry, within an industry position that it was favorable to them, but that they were hungry for change, so that they were keen for growth and for that innovation. And essentially, when I came back, those are the factors that I was looking for, and what I ended up finding. Lucky enough that I found it, and it was here at Liberty, and we're starting the team. So at the moment, I have a data engineering team and a data science team, where we're starting from early days in terms of the maturity of the company, which you can imagine an organization that is 25 years old but didn't have a data science department before. So we're, for example, now building a data warehouse on the cloud, so then we can get all the data ready for people to access. We're training people on self-service BI, so training, doing data analytics training across the organization. So over the next 12 months, every single person in the organization is going to get data analytics training. And that means from the call center operators
I love
to
that.
HR to
That's
marketing to
fantastic.
finance, everyone. So then they can self-service, and then obviously we'll have the data scientists doing the optimization, the experiments, the predictions, etc.
That is fantastic. I love how you are kind of building up a data literate workforce by empowering the people around you to use data science, no matter what role you play. Like you're looking to like, hey, we can be much more productive, much more efficient if everyone kind of learn some of these tools and think about, hey, how can we leverage this data to make my job easier, better, be more efficient? And I love your mindset also of like, how has our jobs changed over the last 10, 20 years? Like our workday shouldn't look the same as technology has evolved, as data has evolved. So I love your mindset. And I also love as you've talked through kind of your history, how goal driven you are. Like you're constantly setting these goals for yourself on things you want to achieve. So as you were chatting and as I was looking at I was looking on LinkedIn, looking at your work history and the things that you've done. You have like always been in some sort of leadership role, like whether it was back in college, like you're consulting, there you are leading a company, even while you're in college. You then, quickly went into consulting. You ended up starting a company, leading, 50 different data scientists at one point at that company. And then you're going into another company, building up a brand new team. Did you always know, like, I want to be a leader? Was leadership always like, I'm going to be a leader no matter what I end up doing?
Great question, and it's one that I only figured out with the benefit of hindsight. um, and what happened was that and essentially the short story is that it was all programming that I received from my mom very early on when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And what happened was that I was born with a heart problem. So I was born with a defective heart, and in the heart has 4 chambers, and between the bottom 2 chambers, I didn't have a wall. So it meant that, and one half of the heart has sort of blood with oxygen, and the other half has blood without oxygen. So by not having that wall between the bottom 2, it meant that it was getting mixed. The blood with and without oxygen was getting mixed. And then that mix was getting pumped through my body. Instead of having only blood with oxygen, I had sort of this mix. And sometimes babies are born and they have this defect like I had, and then sometimes it closes automatically by the time the baby is 6 years old. And so the doctor advised my parents to wait to see if that was going to happen, and it didn't. So then, as maybe like a couple of months after I turned 6, I had the surgery to get that closed off, and from there, from a health perspective, was monitored for about 12 years after that, and then sort
Wow.
of graduated from monitoring because they said now it's all good. And the interesting thing is that what ended up happening is that they put the patch, but
Yeah.
then as you grow, your heart grows as well, and then the muscle tissue of the heart covered the patch on both sides. So now,
Oh,
essentially, yeah, so weird, right? I didn't figure out it
interesting.
either. So now I have sort of like a normal heart, just with a patch hidden in between the tissue. But what happened was that leading up to the surgery, it was obviously a really emotional time, especially for my mom. I'm the firstborn, and they both felt like they felt kind of guilty for not working out, that there was heart defects in the family and that they didn't get anything checked up, and it was a bit overwhelming. So then what happened is that my mom would read me stories at night, and in the at least in the year leading up to the surgery, and one of the and she would always, when she was reading the stories at night, for me, she was always highlighting the benefit that leaders could bring to other people, in the way that they could look after people, and it was usually because in the stories, the person that would turn out to be a leader had a really hard backstory. And what she wanted to highlight was that, times are tough, but if you pull through, that almost helps you be able to help other people. So then you can use that experience of the grit, the
Yeah,
perseverance, the positive mindset, the long-term thinking. You can use the experience that the negative things give you and prepares you in those dimensions.
that's
You can
right.
use it to help other people later on. And for example, one of the ones that I remember, I don't know why it stuck with me, but I remember she would read me Bambi, right? And
Oh, what a
in
tragedy. Oh, man.
right,
Talk about
yeah.
tragedy. Sometimes I wonder, is that really a kid story?
I know, right? Like the old kid stories, they're hardcore.
Yeah, they are.
And she would read me Bambi, and obviously they live in the forest. The forest gets burned. Essentially, everyone dies. Bambi escapes and has to find their own way, and then eventually they grow up, and then they come back, and they sort of use those learnings to lead the pack and help other people. And when she was reading me those stories, she was highlighting,
Mm,
people go through really hard times. You're going to go through a hard time. You've been sick for all these years. You're going to have this surgery. You're going to push through. You got to be positive. You got to think long term, and you'll get better. And then with these experiences, you can do something better. And the emphasis was always on helping other people. And I obviously didn't realize it at the time. And for many years, I didn't realize where this drive to be a leader came from. And it actually wasn't until I was at a friend's place and his kids had Bambi as a book.
oh.
And I was reading it with them, and I was like, all these memories started flooding back.
Oh, wow.
I told them the story. I told my friend. I told the kids. They ended up giving me the book, and they signed it for me. They're like, "Thank you so much. Your story touched us. Thanks for sharing. Here's the book. You take it. I still have it. So I have a like an old original Walt Disney copy of Bambi for me." From my friend, which is where I think it all came from. But yes, it's something that I really enjoy, and I definitely see that leadership leaders are in a position to really help people, not the people that obviously that they look after, but also organizations and ideally the communities at large. And those are the types of leaders that I really enjoy helping to foster and create as well. And I really enjoy people that want to. I really enjoy helping people taking that step in their journey towards leadership.
I love that. What a great story. And I love how intentional your mom was in
Mm.
like thinking about how I want to raise my son to kind of deal with this adversity and then choosing these stories and highlighting these certain themes. Like that's extremely powerful. That's super powerful, right?
Extremely, yes.
I think that
Yeah.
that's amazing, and props to your mom for doing that. It's always like sometimes it's like that little stuff that's like makes a huge impact later on, and then like later on you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that thing, my mom did like impacts me today.
Yeah. It's so much, so much. Yes. And we spoke about it maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And we're talking about the time of the surgery and the stories. And I told her how I remembered Bambi, and we're both crying. And she was like, "I can't
Mm.
believe you remember." And anyway, I don't know
Oh,
where she got it from, but it was yeah, amazing what she did.
that's awesome. So, tell me about your transition from leading a consulting company with all these different data scientists and software engineers. You, after 5 years, you said you sold off your part of the division, and then you decided to go and see what you can do within the corporate world. So, tell me about that transition from like leading an organization from the ground up, and then going, okay, great, it's very successful. I feel like I've done my job here. I'm going to let that go. I have this new challenge of I want to now do the same thing, but within a big company. Um, But now it's like now you're a leader within a larger matrix. All right, and you have other leaders in front of you. Before you could just like, if you want to do something else, you just do it because you're the leader. Now you was like you now have to report to other leaders. So tell me about that transition.
Oh man, it was definitely a tougher than what I expected, and because when I had my consulting business, I felt that it always took us a long time to develop a relationship with our customers, so they would take on more of our ideas, and a lot of the people that I worked with, especially the people that were extremely technical, they would get frustrated with that, and they would say to me like, "Why are we doing all this boring work?" Right? And I'm like, "Well, we're helping a customer,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we're developing a relationship. We're making a difference in their world." And if we think it's easy or boring or whatever, it just shows how much value we can provide for the customer, because we can bring them along the journey
That's
as far
right.
as we can see. So let's think about it positively. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say like yeah, it's like establishing that trust takes a long time. I think of it like you're dating somebody. Like
Yes,
you don't get trust right away. You have to like earn that trust, and that could take a long period of time,
a long time, to the
right?
point that I remember I would say to everyone, I said, the first three projects that we do with a customer, they're part of our sales cycle.
Hmm.
So essentially, project number one, we do what we're asked. We do it really quickly, really efficiently. We make sure that we go above and beyond, and that we over deliver, and they're super happy. They give us the next one. We follow the same pattern. We might put in a couple of our ideas, not too much, essentially. Let's go for number three, kick some goals again, and then let's have a discussion to say, hey, this is what we learned about your company. This is what we think that you can do, and create that partnership where then we keep traveling together, but after we earn that trust.
Yeah, yeah.
And that time was, obviously, from a business perspective, really challenging, and from a professional perspective, a period of rapid growth by having so much responsibility, and I really enjoyed that. But I always felt that I could give more in on the side of the ideas. So I was creating those relationships, and we were getting essentially our ideas heard, and we were getting chances to implement them. But I always thought, well, it's a difficult game to get the buy-in, and we are getting there, but it's slow, and that was sort of what led me to think, okay, how about we try it on the inside and then see
Hmm.
how quickly I can implement the ideas there, having learned a lot of the small business or the entrepreneurship skills that I didn't have before, like selling. I was the only sales guy for the company. In terms of marketing, I had to do a lot of presentations. And the project management, the project delivery, I had experience in. But as the company grew, I moved more into a program manager, which was a lot of different customers, a lot of different projects, and having to manage the delivery across all of them. That was a challenge, a new challenge for me during that time. And then when I moved in house, I thought, great, I'll have some responsibility. I'll be able to implement things faster. I'll be able to get consultants in if I need. It'll just be
Yeah.
super zippy. Obviously not. So when I started in this large organization, so 50,000 people in the company, 5,000 people in the division, and in the division that I was in this B2B, literally nobody wanted to know about data science. So
Mm.
obviously this is years back, but
Right, right, right.
I was working with executives, with business heads, and they were like, yeah, all this stuff, it sounds all right, but their point of view was that in the B2B world, especially with the large companies, because we were dealing with customers, with companies that had above $400 million in revenue. So in their mind, in the mind of the business heads and the executives at this company at the time, they said, there's so few customers that are at this level. So for example, the bank at the time had I think, 30,000 customers of that size, right? So then they were saying kind of like, what are we going to do with data? There's not enough customers. It's not like in the
Mm.
retail side where you have tens of millions of individuals, maybe hundreds of millions as a customer, and then you can create propensity models and you can do predictions and you can automate your marketing and things like that. They're saying in that world, we get it. In this world, there's only
Mm.
30,000 customers. And
Mm.
because they're companies, the sales process is a complex sales process. And it means that it's a, they would say to me, it's a contact sport. So by that, what they
Mm.
meant is they had to be face to face with the CEOs, with the COOs, with the CMOs, with the CFOs, right? They had to be face to face with the executives to get the deals over the line. So then they were saying it's a highly personal business. It's a
Mm.
highly personalized business. What are you going to do with data? Get out of here.
Yeah.
So it was interesting facing up to that challenge and
Yeah.
going what do you do in the world of small data or no data or where nobody cares. and and so for the first 6 months, I remember we did about 45 or 50 prototypes for different areas within the company. And it was like just throwing stuff against the wall to see what
Mm.
stuck. And
Mm-hmm.
what stuck was nothing. Nothing
Okay.
stuck.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
literally
that's
like,
gotta
yeah.
be frustrating. Like
Oh man.
you're trying to make a business case. You're like trying to sell this idea internally, and leaders are coming back to you and say like, we don't think there's enough market share here. Like, I don't sure what we're gonna do. If you want to try something, go for it. And now you're like, okay, let's try to do something, and then you're like sharing all these different ideas, and like nothing's really sticking.
Nothing.
Oh,
And I was like very frustrated, kind of
yeah.
devastated, and I was like, okay, how do I figure it out? What's going on? And what happened was that we had two during those first 6 months. We had two prototypes um, that the banker that got them liked them enough to show it at a conference,
Oh,
and it
okay.
was and it was just like some market analysis to see how one of them was around how beef producers in Australia were going to benefit around from the growth in China, and we found that Australia was one of the main exporters of exporters of beef to China, and that the Australian beef was seen as very high quality in China,
Hmm.
and that obviously as the rise of the middle class has been happening in China, there's been more and more demand, and we could take a bigger share of that. And what we found was that the amount of export of Australian beef to China had stayed constant in volume or pretty constant in volume, grown a slight bit, but in market share, we're rapidly decreasing because the demand in China was rising so quickly that
Mm.
by us staying constant, we weren't selling, or we weren't growing along with them, so we weren't benefiting them from that partnership, and we found that in the analysis, and then the banker was showing it in conferences, and that sort of started to get a little bit of appetite, and that's when I went, you know what? Let's just focus on the customer. Let's just go and build stuff for them, because then
Mm.
when they see the value of the data, they pull us in straight away, and then that's how I ended up going back to, as I was saying before, like going back to my consulting roots, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
okay, we'll build something directly for our customer, being the large companies. We can show them that we can add value. We'll focus on data that they don't have, and providing value that they couldn't get, that they can't get themselves. And by that I mean looking at credit card transactions and bank accounts, and then seeing what are the buying behaviors of people that are customers of those companies, and how do they behave in the industry, or with them, how is the behavior of those customers with that company different to with their competitors. We looked at things of who companies should partner with. We ended up doing things like shopping center design. So, for example, we had a shopping center company, and one of the big questions was, we're designing a new shopping center. We're going to have three jewelers. Do we put them all together? Do we put them all separate? Or do we spread them out as far as possible? What's going to maximize our sales the most? And it was sort of questions like this that we would like get stuck into the data, start looking at different scenarios, start analyzing where people bought things, and we would do it all or largely from credit card transactions, seeing across Australia, New Zealand. We have customers in Asia as well, and in that case, we ended up suggesting to put them all quite close together. And then you create within the shopping center, because it was quite large, you create almost this center of gravity for jewelers, and then people could shop around, and that was the best experience for the customer. So once we started getting to those insights, it was much better. And then as a team, we got more budget, we were able to grow, and we became more popular internally once the customers were saying, these are the guys I want to talk to.
Nice. That's nice. Well, I love too, Felipe, is that it's funny because like in a lot of our data talks, we talk about the technology side, the data science side. And what I'm hearing from you is sometimes what we don't think about is the selling side. Like a good data science leader has to know how to sell it internally and externally. Can you talk about that?
So much. And there's always so much resistance because you're going against people's self-doubts, against their self-images, against their impressions of themselves, sometimes what they're trying to hide. But what I mean is that the large proportion of the workforce today, we grew up at a time where most people thought maths was hard and numbers was not their thing. And obviously now we're in a world that where maths is everything, and we have so much information that we need to be analyzing it statistically. And for a long time, people have hidden from the statistics in their careers, and they've leaned into making decisions by gut, by experience, by getting other people's advice, and now you as a data scientist have the potential of embarrassing the leaders in other areas, the professionals in other areas, embarrassing them and calling out their knowledge or lack thereof by coming in with the facts. So it's initially met with so much resistance, and I think that you have to be really empathetic to that experience that a lot of people have, and the more you can make sure that you're taking them along for the journey, that you're being really clear, and if you feel that you're dumbing things down too much, then you need to be still accurate, but I would say dumb it down even more. and as a perfect example, literally, I think it was a couple of months ago, we had a meeting with some senior stakeholders around the business, and we were running an experiment, and a few different experiments in their area, and their question was, how do we know that our efforts are working? If the market goes up, then won't all our experiments just show positive results? How do we know that it's our efforts that are driving the result? And one of the data scientists said, do you even understand how we are creating the experiments? And I was like, well, that's not very helpful for us to come together as a collegial group of colleagues. So I sort of jumped in and I said, oh, well, let me tell you, like the way that we do the experiment design is that we have a control group that doesn't get the new efforts, and then the treatment group that gets the new efforts. And then even if the market goes up or down, we just compare those two. And they were like, of course, great. And that was sort of put to ease. So it's having those. I think that perspective consistently, that empathetic perspective, that understand where people are at. And one of the things that I started doing early on, when I would analyze data about a business, and then I would have to present to the executives, one of the things that I started doing to sort of put those worries at ease was to do it like at the beginning, do a mini game show. And by that I meant that in our analysis, we would find usually, say, 4 or 5 insights that we were like, I didn't expect that. And I would constantly say this to a team, whenever you come across something that you go, oh, I didn't expect that, just capture it. It'll obviously make it into the presentation, into the analysis, etc. But capture it, and we'll put it into our game show, a little quiz at the
I
beginning.
like that.
And we would give them multiple choice, and I got them to vote with their hands. So essentially, there was no record of who was right or who was wrong,
Oh, that's
but
nice.
everyone
Yeah.
knew for themselves whether they were right or wrong. And so I would always start as like, great, we're gonna talk to you about what we found, but first, let's do a quick quiz. And it was like, which state do you think gives you the highest amount of revenue per head or something? And it's like, is it state A, B, or C? Show hands for A, show hands for B, show hands for C. Great. I wouldn't give them the answer. The answer would come in later. And then it was the next question, and it was great. It was literally 3 to 5 minutes, lighten up the mood a little
I
bit,
like that.
get them engaged, get their minds primed for the information, and then as we went through the analysis, they would get the answer, and only then the individual person would know whether they were right or wrong, but they were ready to take on the information. So I think it makes a crucial role in the end-to-end analytics, because the adoption of the analytics is where you get the value. And I've seen so many times that people go do excellent work that then doesn't get presented very well, doesn't get sold very well, and it's almost like the wheels are not being oiled well enough, and just everything cranks to a halt instead of having the smooth transition that it could have. And it's obviously an area that I'm really passionate about, and I think that the more empathetic we can be, the better.
Yeah, I love your approach, and I think that how thoughtful you are about who's the audience in the room, who am I talking with, what's their level of understanding of this statistical model or this algorithm that I'm going to be sharing. Like, they might not have any sort of background in this, so I need to present it in a way that's going to elevate them, make it interesting so they understand it. Because you're going to be able to present easier. You're going to be able to sell better if everyone's on the same page. And I also like that you said, like, you're bringing them along in the journey. You're like, here's the challenge that we have. Here's what we really struggled with. But then here are some different experiments that we developed to try to help solve it. And you're kind of bringing them along and then using language that's appropriate to the audience. I was in a meeting, this is a while back, and one of my friends was talking with the CMO about what sort of content management system that they should be using internally. And so he was giving examples of two different types. One type that was being used was kind of the code was being written as things were needed, and it was not based on any sort of structure. And so he described that model as like, this is like the Play-Doh version, where you're developing something, you're just kind of like fixing things and constructing it with Play-Doh. He treated the code like Play-Doh. And then he said,
Yes.
But this is a more structured, this is Lego version. Like, these are the elements that are already built, right? And the Lego version is going to be much more stable. And I love that,
Brilliant.
right?
It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. And I was like, I love that. Like, the Lego and the Play-Doh, like, it totally makes sense to me. I get it. Right? And I don't have to know anything about coding.
Correct. And it's like, okay, we can talk about the same thing. We know what we're talking about. It's a great way to bring them along.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that example.
Yeah. So I was like the fact that like you're doing that, you're like thinking about your audience and thinking about, okay, how do I tell this story? How do I bring them all in? Because when the light turns on, oh, I get it. I get what you're saying. Yes. Now I understand. Let's do that. Right. Because if you can't sell that, idea, if the light doesn't turn on, it's like, no, if I don't know what you're doing, there's no way I'm going to approve it.
Correct. Nothing will proceed if they're uncomfortable. And I think that's the something that we should try to remember more, that it's about their comfort level. Because you can sometimes, depending on the executive, you can have all the facts laid out and you can say this is 100% the right thing to do, but they're uncomfortable about how it's going to make them look, what it's going to
That's
do to
right.
their political power, to their positioning. Maybe there's unintended consequences that they can't foresee because they don't understand what they're being shown. And that discomfort is what grinds everything to a halt and just puts a stop to it. So I think that the more that we can be aware and empathetic of those feelings, then the better and the more impact we'll be able to have with our work.
So, some of the top questions we get in our data science community on Facebook um, is interviewing, and I'm curious about, as you're looking and as you're building your team of different types of data scientists, what are some of the qualities, some of the skills, traits you look for in a person when you're bringing somebody on? Because I know especially a lot of the younger data scientists are just graduating from college. They may not have any sort of industry experience. They're coming out, they're fresh, they've just did a thesis, they understand some programming languages, they understand the math, but they've never worked in industry. So they're coming in for the first time in interview, and they want to impress you, but they're just wondering, they're curious about, what are you looking for when you hire?
Yeah, great question. And in the past, when I was working, for example, at that large bank, I built the entire team with graduates. So essentially,
Oh,
people that were finishing university or college, and we were doing intakes of 10 people at a time. And it meant that for that, we were interviewing
wow.
300, 400 people. And I was doing literally
Gee
like
whiz.
entire weeks of 45-minute interviews back to back, nonstop,
Oh,
every day.
what?
Insane.
That
Yeah.
is insane. And that's got to be super hard. You're talking to all these smart people and you got to
Oh
narrow it
man.
down.
Yeah. And it was So the process that we had was first interview, bring us a project that you have worked on, that you wrote the code, and let's go through a bit of the code and then the insights. Second interview, and obviously in all the interviews we had a bit of a chat to get to know them. But first interview, bring us a project that you've done. We'll look at the code. Second interview had a live coding challenge as part of
Oh,
it. And for the third one, we would give them some data that they would take home and work on for a couple of weeks, and then bring us the results and present it on the third interview. And the things that I was looking for is, number one, they had to impress me or us, where we were interviewing, but impress us with at least one thing technically. So
hmm.
that might be the way that they prepared the data was really good, or they were really creative in the features that they were able to create, or they brought in external data that we hadn't thought of, and that was really good. Or obviously the way that they built the model, or they were aware that they were not overfitting, or the way that they created test sets, whatever it was. But we're like one thing. If we see like one thing that
Hmm.
we see excellence in and we're impressed by, we got a good sense that the person holds themselves to high standards and is willing to go into depth in different subjects. And if we can provide and show them what depth looks like in other subjects, in other areas, then they would be willing to go there as well. That was the assumption behind that first one. Then we were looking for people that were open-minded and coachable. And the way that we tested that during the interview was, I don't know if it's a little bit controversial, but
This is gonna be good. This will be
I
good.
know, right? But the
That's
way
okay.
that
I'm curious about this one, because this is a tough one. How do you know if
yeah,
someone's teachable?
I would call them out on something that I would tell them that they were wrong about something, and the controversial bit is that sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. But
Okay,
I would
interesting.
so with other questions, I would say things like, "Oh, can you tell me more about this? Why did you approach it like that, etc." And then I was like, "Oh, that's wrong." And I would
Oh
see,
wow. Oh my gosh. I might
tough,
freeze
right?
up on that one. I might freeze up on that one.
Really tough, really tough. And the thing is that I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to react. I don't know if I want to be on the receiving end. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. But it would then their reaction would say so much about the person, because they would say, oh, sometimes they would say, oh, you're right, I see it because I thought X, but now that you say that, I see that it's actually Y, and I should have gone down this path. You're right, actually. Thanks for that. So then if I do that, then it means that it'll have these flow-on effects on my analysis. And they were able to talk us
Talk
through
through
that.
it. Okay, okay.
Other people were curious. So if I said, oh, I don't know if that looks right, and then they would say, oh, why do you say that? I don't see it, but I'd love to know what you see that I don't see. And they were sort of wanting to know. Those were the attitudes that I was looking for.
That's right. That's
Right.
right.
Instead of but for example, I had people, sometimes very experienced people, that they were like, no, you're wrong. And end of conversation.
I get that. Like they work really hard on something they know for sure. This is right. But your whole test here is like, how are they going to react when challenged? Because you're like, well, if they challenge me, whatever. But if they challenge a business leader, like they can't do that way. You can't behave like that in a business meeting.
Correct.
No matter how right you know you are, you can't just, right?
Yeah, and especially as data scientists, we work across so many different domains that the domain knowledge is something that we usually don't have or are acquiring in the process. So if you're not able to work collaboratively with people in a way that they are able to give you their knowledge and you are able to give them yours, if you don't have that sharing and flow of knowledge where you're able to accept as well as give, then it's really not going to work, and people might end up being like an expert in time series and work with the world's best researchers or something like that, but then they're not able to translate that to business value because they're not able to have that interaction with people. So it's something that I was really looking for, that obviously I saw as one of the success factors during the consulting time. And then thirdly, the other thing that I was looking during the interviews is people that we could be friends with. So people that you felt that you could trust, that they were open and honest about what they know, what they don't know, what their mistakes are, and yeah, having that trust is so important, because as obviously data science is a team sport, and nobody knows everything that there is to know in this space. So you need to work together in a way that you can trust each other, and you have to get to a point that you can say to me, you're like, hey, you made a mistake here, and I go, oh, thanks, man, thanks for letting me know. I didn't see it. We'll fix it, and I know that you're not like stabbing me in the back or trying to make me look bad as part of that. So having that relationship was really important too.
I think that's solid advice. Yeah, because if you detect really strong ego in an interview, which is supposed to be like the best version of yourself, like you're in your best behavior in an interview, and if you detect like big ego or something, some sort of conflict, that's like a red flag. Like this is probably not going to work out on our team, because if you're like trying to build collaboration, we're here to all win together. It's not about me versus you, because there's definitely like that attitude, right? There's that attitude of like, when I go in, it's me versus you. Like one of us is gonna get promoted, it's gonna be me.
Yeah, and I've made that mistake in the past where I've had people like that in my teams, right? And I had to constantly tell myself to suck it up, because I was like, well, they're an excellent performer, but they're an asshole. And and then I was literally torn. I was like, do I want the results? What is it doing to the culture? How do I quantify the changing culture? And then you, like, at least in my case, like I had to end up calling it, but I made the mistake more than once, and it's something that now it's unacceptable for me that regardless of performance, culture is number one. And then so people can work together and we can have a very harmonious team that works well. And then we want everyone to become great performers. But anyone who's difficult, out the door.
Yeah. And some of that sometimes like they can interview really, really well, and you get a certain idea like, oh, this person would really work well with my team, and then they're on a project, and 2 months in, 3 months in, you start to detect this is actually hurting the team atmosphere. Now I have to have some difficult conversations, and it's not looking good. That's like kind of the hard part of being a leader is like, how do you protect that team culture? Because if you start to notice, people that are, um, hurting it, then it's like you got to figure out a way to, have those conversations, and if needed, they have to leave. And that's like the toughest part. That's the toughest part of being a leader, I think.
It is, and it's having that awareness and that understanding of people that you can talk with them, you can give them examples of the bad behavior, you can do that repeatedly, but if that's something that people are unwilling to see or unwilling to change, then unfortunately you do have to call it. It's your responsibility.
And I love also that you talked about that trust factor, like that third thing that you said you're looking for. Like, is this person that I can actually work with? And you're doing like a series of interviews with this person, so you're getting a sense of their personality. And I totally resonate with that. Like when I'm looking to bring people on, like, is this somebody that, like, I always think about like, could I go on a car trip with this person across country? You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's kind of like my test,
Brilliant.
right? Because like, would we be able to like agree on some music to listen to in the car and have a good time? And it doesn't matter if we stop off at Taco Bell or whatever, like everyone's going to be chill.
Right. Yes.
And that's something that like either you're going to click with that person or you don't. And, it comes down to some personality. I am like grateful for your time. I know we're like out of time. I wanted to ask you before we go about your podcast, Data Futurology.
Yes.
For everyone who's listening in, you can go to Google and just type in datafuturology.com or go to iTunes, Spotify. You'll find Data Futurology there. Tell us about the podcast and what people will discover when they subscribe.
Well, it's about getting the experiences of senior leaders in the data space. We talk about their lessons learned, their mistakes, and what they would like to share with the next generation of data scientists. My sort of vision is that I think that data science is obviously becoming a super necessary skill in today's world, and especially like in business, in government, and research, everywhere, data science is key. What I would love to see is for data scientists to develop the skills so then they can be business leaders, government leaders, research leaders across the board in the future. And I think that for that, we need to focus a lot on the leadership, on the soft skills, on everything else besides the technical side. And I think that the technical side, I think, is very well covered, and there's great institutions that are producing fantastic content. And in the data science culture, we have one obsession with the technical side, and I think that we are not giving enough airtime and enough focus to the other components. And if we do, because we have data science as our core skill and we can go across domain and learn so much, if we focus on these soft skills, leadership, selling, etc., then we can have a world, something that I would love to see, where data scientists of today are CEOs tomorrow. They are CMOs tomorrow. They're CFOs tomorrow. They're head of government tomorrow. They're in parliament, in the Senate tomorrow. And for that, obviously, there's this other other skills that are required, and that as you hear the stories of the leaders, it's something that they all had to develop. They all wish that they would have done it earlier, and they all wish that they would have gotten better at. And so essentially, I'm wanting to beat the drum to say, please do this for yourselves, and I think we can have a much better world through by doing that.
I think that's fantastic. And I love the way that you are modeling this good leadership behavior, the way that you lead your teams. And I love how candid you are with your experiences and just sharing like freely, like, here, I made some mistakes along the way. I don't want you to make these mistakes. So make sure that when you do this, do it this way. Because all that is super important. Because if a data scientist is young, comes in and can like learn those soft skills early on, they could be so much far. I think about like in my own career, like if I had learned a lot of these business skills and soft skills like early on, it would have benefited me so much. And so
Yeah,
I love the
same.
fact that you're like, yeah, right. I love the fact that you're like giving back, like helping these younger data scientists. Like, here's how you can be successful faster earlier
Yes.
on. Like, check
Yes.
out your like, keep your ego in check, and like all these little things that they can be doing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Work on your communication. Work on your presentation, selling, leading. Get all these little experiences along the way, and you're going to go so much further. And then your impact is going to be so much greater. And then hopefully people are going to be able to do the same thing back. Essentially, give back to the community and help others in their journey.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Philippe, for your time
Mike, thanks so
today.
much.
For those that want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to follow you and keep up with the work you're doing?
Yeah, so definitely LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Data Futurology on all of them, or on LinkedIn or Facebook, find me under my name, Felipe Flores, and I'm really happy to receive all DMs, direct messages, etc. And yeah, really happy to connect with people.
Awesome. And for those that are on LinkedIn, just type in Felipe Flores, spelled Felipe. Last name is Flores, Flores. And that's where you can connect with him and follow him there on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Felipe, for your time today.
Thanks so much, Mike. Great speaking with you today. Thank you.